There are no shortcuts to getting highly coveted press coverage for your brand, only smart cuts like the DIY PR project. Learn how to grow your brand's credibility with PR on a budget with me by your side. This program is your all-in-one membership with expert training, customizable templates, and a supportive community to cheer you on every step of the way. Join us and start growing your business with free publicity today. Sign up now at diy-pr.com. Hello. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Marina Goodwin, host of the Grow Your Wealth podcast and founder and CEO of Factor PR. Today, I want to talk about how to grow your brand the smart way in 2025. We are already one quarter deep, almost, into the new year. And while so many people come out with predictions at the end of the year before, so in this case in 2024, about what's going to be trending in the world of, brand growth, public relations, marketing, influencers, all of that good stuff. What I really wanted to talk about today is what we're already seeing happen. So these aren't predictions, but trends that we're spotting on the ground with our clients at Factor PR. But first, let's take a quick look back at 2024. The past year, we saw some really, really fascinating trends. So first and foremost, global digital ad spending hit $626 billion. That's with a B, $626 billion. However, we saw a lot of brands really starting to question like the rising cost of customer acquisition, its effectiveness, and paid media alone. Hi, Jess. Meanwhile, though, influencer marketing has grown into a $21 billion industry since 2024. And podcasts have actually maintained their spot as one of the most trusted sources of information, with 69% of listeners discovering new products through podcast ads, believe it or not. That one was actually kind of surprising to me because at Factor PR especially, and as part of our DIY PR project program, there are resources in terms of pitching yourself, business owners, and so forth for things like podcasts, which are great to actually appear on the show. But even I noticed this with some of our clients starting in the fall of last year. A lot were approaching us not just for being on the podcasts, but actually also spending money on the podcasts for ads. And so that's a really interesting thing we'll touch on as well here in a moment. But going into 2025, especially leading into Q2, which I know for a lot of brands, things really start to heat up as we head into the summer season, as we head into the holiday season as well too. People are really starting to think about revving up those marketing and PR engines. So with that said, here are just 5 quick and easy trends that we're seeing that have been really successful for our clients at Factor PR. I wanted to share these with you today for your consideration. And we can also talk about, after this short presentation, how you can leverage some of these trends specifically for your business. So the first trend that we have identified is that micro and nano influencers are not going anywhere. In fact, we are seeing them becoming more important than ever as far as an influencer marketing campaign goes. So let's kick things off here. One of the most effective, yet in my opinion, underestimated tools in brand growth is leveraging micro and nano influencers. So these are smaller influencers, smaller following. So think fewer than 10,000 followers, and they can have engagement rates that far exceed their macro influencer counterparts. So think about it this way. If you want to work with an influencer and you see, oh my goodness, they've got 500,000 followers, 1 million followers, you instantly kind of assume that I'm getting my brand in front of more people. And that can be true, right? But engagement rate takes it a step further because typically, we want not just reach when we work with influencers, but we want impact as well. When you think about actually connecting with people, reaching is like reaching your arm out to touch them. We just don't want to touch people with our brand. We want to connect people to our brand because people buy with their heads and their hearts. So a tap on the shoulder is usually not enough to get enough attention. We really want to connect, and engagement rate actually shows us this is a measurable to be able to determine how many people, or rather a percentage of an influencer's audience, is actually engaging with their content. So, an influencer with 1 million followers and has 0.5% engagement rate, which means 0.5% of their followers are actually engaging, liking, commenting, saving, sharing their content, isn't tremendous as far as metrics go. But a nano influencer whose average engagement rate hovers closer to 5%, that's more than double the average of larger influencers. So your pool might be a little bit smaller, but people are connecting with your brand more. They're remembering your brand more because they're not just scrolling and, seeing something pop up on their screen and then scroll along. They're really taking the time to stop their scroll and engage with that content as well, too. Maybe even follow your brand as well. So engagement is absolutely everything. It's not just about reaching a large audience. It's about reaching the right audience. And that's another key reason why working with micro and nano influencers can really make all the difference, because people trust these influencers and they're likely to take action based on their recommendations. So these influencers tend to feel more authentic. They tend to feel more relatable. And ultimately, that's what we're looking for. That makes really highly valuable content and also very valuable for building that long-term brand loyalty that we all want to achieve as well. So if you're thinking about influencer marketing, and for most brands and businesses, product-based brands as well as service-based brands, I actually love influencer marketing, maybe the most for service-based businesses. Don't overlook the power of micro and nano influencers. It can be so easy to just to scoff at someone's following, like, oh, they're not an influencer. But think about what an influencer is, right? It might not be someone that does this full time. It just might be someone who has a very niche audience. And the most important thing, again, about that audience is that they trust that influencer. So this is, I think, really going to become more high impact throughout this year. I'll tell you a really quick story as well, just to kind of prove this point a little bit more. But we worked with a sunless tanning brand for a number of years here at Factor PR. And the marketing team at this tanning brand at the time really loved the Real Housewives. They were like, that's our people, that's our audience, even though I would say that our team didn't quite agree with that. This was a legacy tanning brand, if you would, that had been around for a couple of decades. But the branding and everything had really evolved to be a lot more like fresh and youthful. And anyway, I digress. But the marketing team at this tanning brand really, really wanted to work with a certain housewife who had over 1 million followers. She created some content for us. She posted it, and I kid you not, this one post cost the brand at the time $8,000, which this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I would say prices have gone up significantly since then. But not only cost the brand about $8,000, but we didn't see one single sale as a result of this. And a lot of that comes down to, is it the right influencer with the right audience? And do they have a highly engaged audience as well? The other thing as well, too, in this case, is that the relationship with this influencer was what we call transactional. So that was a one and done engagement. And we know, just in terms of human behavior, especially human buying behavior, it's not very frequently that you see something or you're introduced to a product or service once and you're like, that's it, take my money, right? Unless that product or service really solves a problem, is obviously hitting the consumer at the right place, the right time, all of that good stuff. There's a sense of urgency around it. We can talk a lot about about sales strategies, but we're going to talk more about PR and marketing strategies here. Um, these one and done types of relationships with influencers, in our experience at Factor, they don't really yield much in terms of results. So things have evolved, right? And so that leads me to trend number two is community centric campaigns over one and done transactional relationships with your audience as well as with influencers. So I always say that the difference between a brand that has longevity and not is oftentimes community, because a brand without a community is really considered a commodity, right? Um, Natalie Ellis, who is a marketing guru, she has kind of drilled down the 3 ways to grow your audience online. And if you've taken the DIY PR masterclass, you know that we've drilled this down in terms of the 4 types of media. We've looked at it through the lens of the PESO model, which stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And so what Natalie's done is kind of drilled it down even further. And that is there are 3 ways to ultimately grow your audience. You can buy your audience with advertisements. You can borrow your audience with PR and affiliates, and you can build your audience with community. So all 3 of these things are obviously incredibly important. But if you're building a brand, and if you're building a brand for the long run, not just a business, right? Building a long-standing brand, you will benefit greatly from building a community. Now, out of those 3, buying your audience, borrowing your audience, or building your audience, obviously building is going to take the longest, right? But arguably, it's also going to have one of the biggest payoffs because you own your audience when you build it, right? You don't own your audience when you buy ads. You don't own your audience necessarily through PR unless you, transact them in some way, get them to follow you on social, get their email address, and so forth as well too. So really focusing in on building community with community-centric campaigns. So let's take a look at exactly what do I mean by community-centric campaigns. So it's really about creating spaces, either online or offline, that your customers can connect with one another as well as share their experience. Okay. So this could be in the form of like an online forum. It could be a, social media broadcast channel like on Instagram. It could be in-person events, workshops. The sky's the limit, right? We can get really creative here, like whatever makes sense for your community can help you create that loyal following that deeply connects people to your brand beyond just, purchasing from them. I would really highly suggest building that community around the value that you add to people's lives, around the problem that you solve as well too. Because that's really what people kind of rally about. That's what really makes our brands human, is by leading the charge with a human first tactic, in this way, building community, right? So a strong community will ultimately really generate this army of your biggest advocates, so to speak, to help spread the word about your brand organically. And then even be a sort of a soundbox, right, for really great ideas. If you're launching a new product, a membership, a service, right? It's so nice to be able to have that built-in community and being able to not just build loyalty and trust through various incentives and so forth, but also bend their ear about new things that you have on the horizon. Because if your community is excited about it, right, they're going to tell other people about it. And it really helps get that buy-in that they're part of not just a brand, but potentially as much as even a movement as well too. This worked really well last year for our client Nativa Spa. If you're not familiar with them, they are an amazing body care brand based out of Brazil. They're a subsidiary of the Boticário Group and landed stateside just a few years ago. And in the fall of 2023, we helped Nativa launch what we called the Nativa Squad, which was a curated group of influencers that really became brand advocates for Nativa Spa. And the way that we formed this community again, it wasn't a one and done kind of deal. The Nativa Spa members that have been with Nativa Spa or that were onboarded, I should say, back in the fall of 2023, many of them are still in the squad. They're still sharing content. And in addition to providing Nativa Spa with this, obviously awesome community experience to help the brand as well as to again, kind of build a BFF list of influencers along the way that can preach about the brand to their own audiences and so forth. It's really taken a very creative route as well too. They've featured influencers on the homepage of their website. The influencers have benefited because they're really able to establish authority with their audiences as well, because they're working with a brand long term, which is what all influencers really, really want. At the end of the day, they want a long-term commitment with a brand. They don't want a one and done relationship either, right? And so this community for Nativa Spa, the influencers are paid to be part of this community. But if you don't have a budget and maybe can't work with influencers, or maybe it doesn't even work quite well with your business, you don't have to go this route, right? Like I mentioned, things like online forums, like think about the one that we use in the DIY PR project. We use a platform called Kajabi, for example. It could be just something as simple as an online community where you're offering incentives and inviting people to join for free. Maybe, setting up something like a point system. And then if they post so many times on their social, they get something for free, right? It could be, a number of different ways, but the most important thing is that it's got to meet your community, your fan base, your customers, your clients where they are. That's really, really going to be important when building a community, whether it's a community of influencers, customers, or clients, as I mentioned. Survey them and see what they want, because in 2025, that is something that we have trend spotted that has really taken off, especially since COVID, is that people are really, really excited about community. They want human connection. And again, that can be online or off. So definitely think about how you can integrate community into your business for brand growth in 2025 and beyond. The third trend that I want to talk about is the resurgence of owned media. So again, let's go back to that paid model. We've got paid like advertising, earned like PR, shared like social, and owned like your website, podcasts, email newsletters, blogs, and so forth. Owned media never went away. But boy, is it back better than ever. So in 2025, I am here to tell you it is time to dust off that old blog. It's time to dust off that email newsletter that maybe you haven't been sending out as frequently. It's time to maybe also think about getting on some podcasts, because owned media channels are having a major resurgence. And the answer is pretty easy to explain, right? Because owned media really does allow us to connect to our audience directly without having to rely on things like social media algorithms or paid ads. I always tell people, like, it's great to have a big social following. We love that for you. However, we've all had those like near heart attack moments when like Meta is down for the day and you were going to start a giveaway or some kind of campaign, or your influencer couldn't get, the whitelisting job done in time because there was a glitch with Insta or whatever, right? Like there's a ton of reasons. TikTok went down for a day a few weeks ago, and we know how that went, right? So that being said, remember, you don't own your audience on social media, right? Everything in your business really has to come down to generating an email list. So what you do want to do is own email addresses from your potential customers or clients. So this is really, really important in a number of different ways that you can incentivize people signing up for an email. Obviously, if you're an e-com business, you get emails from people buying your products. We can talk a little bit about lead generation, lead magnets, things of that sort to really build up your email list. You can even run ads, quite frankly, to build up your email list. But one of the most powerful things and ways to really optimize that ad spend is by making sure that your owned content helps build trust for that cold audience that you're pointing ads to. So if you're pointing ads to your social media, making sure the content there is updated. If you're pointing ads to the website, right? Again, making sure like blog content is relevant and updated as well too, is definitely going to help move the needle for your potential customers and clients. I also mentioned in a recent Grow Your Wealth podcast episode, I actually mentioned ChatGPT in this conversation as well too. And so I know that we've talked about ChatGPT a little bit, and everyone's obviously gaga for it for many reasons. But in this podcast episode that I want to encourage everyone to go listen to, I think it was episode number 9. I had talked about how Factor PR is getting discovered by a lot of potential clients via ChatGPT. And so what's happening is that people are typing into ChatGPT, like, I'm looking for a PR agency that specializes in blah, blah, blah. And it is recommending my agency, which is amazing. And I'm not doing anything to make it do that. There was no paid spend around that. There was no, hacking of some kind. Like, it was just organic pickup of our content on our blog through podcasts, as well as a little bit of social media, but press was a big one as well too. So owned media is not just really, really solid for building trust with your audiences on your platform, but it's also really solid for discovery as well too. So again, things like your blogs are very crawlable, not just from your Googles and Bings, but for ChatGPT also. So great moment to put together an editorial content calendar and see if you can just add a little bit of consistency to your owned media creation, whether it be blogs, email newsletters, and so forth. I briefly mentioned podcasts, by the way, and I wanted to come back to that really quickly. Podcasts are such an incredible way to engage with potential audiences as well. I think I read a stat the other day that said something like over 80% of podcast listeners take some kind of action after they've immersed themselves in an episode. So this action could be a number of different things, right? But the insinuation was that they're going to, visit a website, go to a social platform, download something, etc. So podcast listeners are engaged, and this is engaged kind of in a number of ways, right? If you are going to be on someone else's podcast, that listenership tends to trust whoever's hosting the podcast, right? So you're already, when you think about borrowing an audience through their owned media channels, you're already getting that like, hey, pre-vetted endorsement by just appearing on someone else's podcast. And then the second way it helps build trust, right, is it's typically a longer format piece of media. So whereas people can kind of scroll past things quickly online or skim a news article online very quickly, they're not really getting to know you. They're not really getting to know the story behind their business like they are in a podcast. So when we think about things like engagement rate, right? Podcasts have a very high engagement rate, right? 88% or over 80%. I think it was 88% of podcast listeners take some kind of action. Oh my gosh, that is like 50 times better than social media. And on top of that as well too, you've got a high engagement rate, and you've got people who are now kind of warmed up to buying what you're selling, so to speak. So in addition to that, 69% of podcast users research have determined that 69% of podcast listeners discover new products or service through podcast ads, like I mentioned earlier too. So if you're someone who might not have a bunch of time to go on a podcast journey on all of these podcasts, a podcast tour, if you will, podcast ads can also be an interesting way to engage with that audience. But I'm an earned media gal. It's free to go on a podcast for the most part. That's where I would start, especially if budgets are tight. But yeah, think about podcasts, how you can integrate that into your overall marketing and public relations strategy. And, also thinking about in the same vein of thought leadership as well too. I'm seeing a lot more businesses start podcasts as well. Not just me, but I was late to that trend, to be quite honest with you. But this is also, an opportunity to explore. Maybe it's building a community around your podcast. Someone who does a remarkable job at this is Jenna Kutcher, who has an amazing podcast called the Goal Diggers podcast. But her Facebook community is like almost 70,000 people strong. So, great way to build community, great way to build content as well. Really a great way to connect and engage with your potential as well as your current audiences as well. Number 4, we're almost there, everyone. So, number 4 in terms of 2025 PR and marketing strategies to grow your brand is not just PR. It's not just about PR, pitch anymore. It's about meshing PR with partnerships. So, I want to talk a little bit about these partnerships because they're really, really moving the needle for our clients when it comes to public relations, especially when it comes to media relations. One of the smartest strategies for amplifying your PR efforts is leveraging relationships with experts. So, your podcast or your product can provide the what, like, what am I selling? Like, I'm selling a product that solves a particular problem, but the experts bring the why behind that product, that problem. Experts add credibility, they add depth to your narrative, and that's exactly what consumers are really craving in 2025. There isn't a single brand that I work with for the most part that is like not in a competitive field. Let's be real. Every field is becoming competitive because social media, for example, has completely leveled the playing field for brands, right? You can go viral without spending a dime. Taylor Swift can happen to wear your headband and you sell out and more overnight, right? You're suddenly a household name. There's so many different ways to kind of, blow up overnight. And that being said, that's what brands think can be the norm. And it's not the norm. It's still not the norm, right? That's only a handful of brands. But that is just something to kind of keep in mind, right? When we're thinking about how do I differentiate from my competition, this is especially important for product-based businesses. Experts can be a really, really good point of definition and differentiation. So at Factor, we do this all the time for our clients, especially our product-based businesses. So for this one, I'm really, really talking to those people. So when you, as a product-based business, partner with thought leaders or advocates, industry experts, these people can really make a huge difference in how your brand is ultimately perceived because these partnerships really create authenticity. They help create authority and they help you also reach a wider audience and earn trust more authentically and more quickly as well too. I believe in this concept so much that last year I actually launched a sister brand to Factor called Realfluence, which is the first and only partnership platform of its kind. And it directly connects beauty brands like in skincare, hair care, body care, and more with licensed experts in similar fields. So think like a skincare brand to a dermatologist, an esthetician to a beauty brand, a massage therapist to a body lotion brand, something along those lines. And so this is not connecting brands to influencers or skinfluencers or people of that nature, right? This isn't about the latest unboxing or the Sephora sale or anything like that. It is about connecting brands with licensed experts in this industry, and they can partner up on media interviews. They can partner up on content creation and they can partner up on things like good old consulting, right? So to take the skincare brand example, if you see that a skincare brand is dermatologist tested, you're like, okay, this is probably, gonna be easy on my skin. If you see the skincare brand has a dermatologist on its board, or maybe highlighted on the homepage with a quote like, this lotion is clinically tested to eliminate, acne within 14 days. I recommend it to my patients, blah, blah, blah. That helps buy trust. And when, the dermatologist can also recommend that brand in the media, that helps buy trust through media coverage. We've seen this happen many times with our clients at Factor PR. Most recently, we represent dermatologists and skincare brands at Factor. And these dermatologists are not necessarily paid by the skincare brands, but, when a dermatologist in this case was interviewed by allure.com and said, hey, what lotion would you recommend for, moisturizing the body? And then they recommended Nativa Spa, right? So that was a great media inclusion for both the dermatologist and for Nativa Spa. And it all came down to a simple partnership. So this can be an excellent way to elevate your brand's trust, to outpace your competition, or at least start to get in the place of the competition you want to be in. So in this case, for a body lotion brand, they want to be among, the heavy hitters, the Aveenos, the Sol de Janeiros, etc. And so dermatologists for them, skincare experts for them has been an excellent stepping stone for them to help grow their overall credibility and grow their awareness and ultimately coverage in the media as well too. So if you are a CPG brand, consider expert partnerships as part of your public relations strategy this year. This is going to be huge, especially since affiliates are heating up so much. People are competing basically on affiliates, right? Which is competing as far as like how much commission that they're sharing for an affiliate to be able to be included in a media article. Rather than competing on things like that all the time, bring in some experts into the mix that can help get that coverage that you so desire through things just like good old fashioned recommendations, right? All right. And then the last one that I wanted to make mention of is related to the last one in terms of partnerships. It comes back down to relationships as well, real relationships in a tech-driven world. I love talking about relationships. So important. And, when people sometimes ask or wonder in the PR community, especially like, do you think AI is going to replace us? I really don't think so, right? Because if there's one thing that AI can't replace, it's human to human relationships. And in media, especially for those of you who are building your own media relationships, that AI might be able to help you with the draft of an email or something, but it can't actually take the place of a real relationship. So let's talk a little bit about that really quickly before we close out. So I know I just discussed how AI is accelerating so much in what we do. It is determining, what brands are being recommended in queries on things like ChatGPT. But again, like one thing it just can't replace, or not yet, unless the singularity happens sometime in the not so distant future, it can't replace that real human to human connection. So, in 2025, AI search engines undoubtedly will have a greater impact on how people are discovering brands. And we're already seeing things like this, like Search GPT, Chat GPT, Gemini, Claude, all of these things. Perplexity, that's one I really like, really have been reshaping how media placements affect search visibility. And that's why relationships with these publications, with these journalists, will be more important than ever. These relationships, they also ensure that your stories about your brand are surfaced accurately and authentically as well too. This is really key because it's easy to get caught up in like the latest AI tools and automation, but we don't want to underestimate the power of these personal relationships. AI can send out a pitch. Yes, sure. If you get any kind of like media database program, the muck racks, decisions, and so forth, they can send the pitches for you. But they can't customize the pitch per se for like recent interactions that you've had with that person. They can't, invite the journalist to coffee. They can't build relationships with those journalists. And quite honestly, like working with the media so frequently, they tell us point blank, like, please don't do that because we can sniff it out from a mile away and we know that it's, another spray and pray, another AI automation. So all of that to say is that we want to continue to make sure to emphasize, prioritize real relationships in this tech-driven world. Automate the things that should be and can be automated, right? Like I'm the first person to like put a Calendly link in an email to save some time that we can just book a meeting on the spot, right? I am also the first person to put an email into ChatGPT and ask it to polish it, clean it up, make sure there's no typos. Absolutely, right? We want to work smarter, not harder. But the place to not make excuses when it comes to building your brand is building relationships. Like those are the things that are really going to stand the test of time, of course, as well. And those are just great, great brand growth strategies, not just for the short term, not just for 2025, but I'm going to make a bet for the long run as well, too. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode deposited some useful advice and insights to help you grow your wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future conversations. You can find more resources, episode details, and updates at growyourwealthpodcast.com. And let's keep the conversation going on Instagram. Follow me at Grow Your Wealth Podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts, questions, or takeaway from today's show. Until next time, remember, burnout is optional. Take care, and I'll see you next week.